The entire courtroom went silent when Ethan Cole laughed at his pregnant wife and said she wasn't even worth a real lawyer. Naomi stood there alone, one hand pressed protectively over her stomach, while his mother watched from the gallery with a satisfied smile, as if everything was going exactly as planned. They had already taken her home, her money, even her name, and now they were about to take her child. But what none of them knew, not Ethan, not his mother, not even the judge yet, was that Naomi had walked into that courtroom carrying far more than just a baby. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. 3 months earlier, Naomi Hale had still believed she could fix her marriage. She sat at the edge of the kitchen table, staring at the cold cup of tea in front of her fingers wrapped tightly around the mug just to stop them from shaking. The apartment felt too quiet, too controlled. Even the air seemed to belong to someone else now. "Don't forget your appointment," her mother-in-law called from the hallway, her voice sharp and perfectly timed. "A good mother doesn't miss prenatal checkups." Naomi nodded, even though the older woman wasn't looking at her. She had stopped expecting eye contact a long time ago. In this house, everything was a command disguised as concern. Ethan entered a moment later, adjusting his tie, already dressed for work. He didn't look at Naomi either. He walked straight to the counter, picked up his keys, and checked his phone like she wasn't even there. "You'll take the bus," he said casually. "I need the car." Naomi blinked. "It's a 40-minute ride." "The doctor, you're not working," he cut in, his tone flat. "You've got time." Her stomach tightened, not from the pregnancy, but from the familiar sting of being dismissed. She had given up her design business for him, sold her equipment, closed her accounts. He had said it was temporary, that they would build something together. Now she didn't even have access to their joint bank account. From the doorway, his mother folded her arms. "You should be grateful, Naomi. Not every woman gets to stay home and focus on her pregnancy." Grateful. Naomi swallowed the word like it might choke her. "I just thought," she started, then stopped. There was no point finishing the sentence. Every thought she had seemed to be wrong in this house. Ethan finally glanced at her, but there was no warmth in his eyes. "You think too much. That's your problem." The front door slammed behind him seconds later. Silence flooded back in. Naomi sat there for a long time, staring at the table, listening to the faint sound of her mother-in-law moving around the apartment, checking drawers, opening cabinets, as if inventorying every inch of Naomi's life. She shifted slightly, her hand instinctively resting over her belly. The baby moved, a small flutter that should have brought comfort. Instead, it made her chest ache. "I'm trying," she whispered under her breath. "I'm really trying." But even as she said it, something inside her didn't believe it anymore. Because trying hadn't stopped Ethan from changing the locks 2 weeks ago when she came home late from a doctor's visit. Trying hadn't stopped his mother from taking her debit card for safekeeping. Trying hadn't stopped the quiet, creeping feeling that she was being watched, measured, and slowly erased. Later that afternoon, while searching for a document in the study, Naomi noticed something that made her pause. A file folder sat half-hidden beneath a stack of legal papers on Ethan's desk. Her name was on it. She hesitated, then slowly, carefully, she reached for it, and the moment she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. Naomi's fingers trembled as she flipped through the documents, her eyes scanning words she didn't fully understand at first, until certain phrases began to repeat. Petition for evaluation of mental fitness. Primary custody to be granted to the father. Subject exhibits signs of instability. Her name was everywhere. Her chest tightened so suddenly she had to grip the edge of the desk to stay upright. She turned another page. There were notes, observations, dates. She appears forgetful. Emotional fluctuations, possible risk to child. Naomi's breath came faster. These weren't official records. They were handwritten notes by Ethan. And worse, some were signed by his mother. A cold realization slid through her body like ice. They weren't reacting to her behavior. They were building a case. Her knees weakened as she dropped into Ethan's chair, one hand instinctively pressing against her stomach. The baby shifted again, as if sensing her panic. "No," she whispered. "No." A soft creak came from the hallway. Naomi froze. The sound of slow, deliberate footsteps approached the study door. She snapped the folder shut, but it was too late. Her mother-in-law stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes sharp and calculating. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Then the older woman smiled, not warm, not kind. "Controlled. I was wondering how long it would take you to find that." Naomi's throat went dry. What is this? Her voice came out thinner than she wanted, but she forced herself to stand. The woman stepped into the room, closing the door behind her with a soft click that felt louder than a slam. It's protection, she said calmly, for the child. Naomi shook her head. This is lies. You're saying I'm unstable, that I can't take care of my own baby? You've been under a lot of stress, the woman replied, tilting her head slightly. We've all seen it. No, Naomi said, her voice rising. You've been controlling everything. You took my money. You track where I go. And yet, the woman cut in smoothly. You sound hysterical right now. The word hit harder than anything else, hysterical. Naomi's mouth opened, then closed again. She could feel it, the trap tightening around her. Anything she said could be used. Her hands clenched at her sides. Ethan knows about this? The woman's smile deepened just enough to answer without words. Naomi felt something crack inside her chest. He's your son, she whispered. How could you let him do this? Because he's protecting his future, the woman said simply. And you are becoming a liability. A liability. The same word Ethan had used last week when he thought she couldn't hear him on the phone. Naomi took a step back, her pulse pounding in her ears. You're trying to take my babies, she said, more to herself than to the woman in front of her. We're trying to make sure that child has a stable home, came the cold reply. And that requires difficult decisions. Naomi's vision blurred for a second, not from tears, but from the weight of what she was finally seeing clearly. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't stress. This was a plan. A carefully built, documented, legally prepared plan to erase her. From the child, from the house, from everything. I'm not signing anything, Naomi said, her voice steadier now, quieter but stronger. Her mother-in-law let out a small, almost amused breath. You won't have to. A chill ran down Naomi's spine. What does that mean? It means, the woman said, stepping closer, her voice lowering, that when the court reviews everything, they won't need your consent. Naomi stared at her, her heart slamming against her ribs. Because suddenly, one terrifying thought rose above all the others. They weren't just planning to take her child. They were planning to prove she didn't deserve to be a mother at all. And for the first time, Naomi realized she might already be too late. Naomi didn't remember walking back to the bedroom. One moment she was standing in that study, staring at the woman who had just calmly explained how her life was about to be taken from her. The next, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands gripping the blanket so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her mind kept replaying the same words. They won't need your consent. Her breathing grew shallow. The room felt smaller, like the walls were slowly closing in. For months, she had felt something was wrong, something beneath the surface, but she had never imagined it was this deliberate, this cold. A knock came at the door, not a gentle one. Naomi, Ethan's voice said from the other side. Open the door. Her heart jumped into her throat. She wiped her face quickly, though she hadn't even realized she was crying, and stood up. For a second, she considered not opening it, just staying inside, pretending she wasn't there. But she knew better. He would come in anyway. She opened the door. Ethan stood there, still in his work clothes, tie loosened, expression already irritated. He stepped past her without waiting and closed the door behind him. I heard you went into my office, he said flatly. Naomi turned slowly. I didn't know I needed permission to walk into my own house. His jaw tightened. Don't start. There it was again, that tone that made everything feel like her fault before she even spoke. She swallowed, forcing her voice steady. I saw the file. He didn't react immediately. He just looked at her, calculating, like he was deciding how much to say. Then he sighed. You weren't supposed to see that yet. The word yet landed like a punch. Naomi felt her chest tighten, so it's real. Naomi, you're trying to take my baby, she said, louder now, her voice shaking. You're building a case to prove I'm not fit. I'm trying to protect our child, he snapped. The sudden sharpness in his voice made her flinch. From what? She demanded. From me? He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the room like this was all an inconvenience. You've been unstable. You forget things. You get emotional over nothing. You're not thinking clearly. That's not true. It is, he said, stopping in front of her. And you know it. Naomi stared at him, searching his face for something, anything familiar. The man she had married, the man who had once held her hand and promised her a future. But all she saw now was distance, coldness, and something worse, conviction. You've been documenting everything, she whispered, every reaction, every moment. You've been waiting for me to break. Ethan didn't deny it. That's what the court needs, he said calmly. Evidence, the word echoed in her ears. Evidence, not love, not concern. Evidence. Naomi took a step back, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. The baby shifted again, stronger this time, And for a brief second, fear overwhelmed everything else. "They're going to believe you," she said, her voice cracking. "You're a lawyer. Your mother, she knows exactly how this works." "I have nothing." Ethan's expression softened slightly, but it wasn't comfort. It was pity. "You don't have to make this harder than it needs to be," he said. "If you cooperate, it'll go smoothly. You'll still be able to see the baby." Supervised at first. Naomi felt like the ground disappeared beneath her feet. "You've already decided," she said quietly. "We've made the responsible decision," he corrected. "We, always we." Naomi looked at him for a long moment, something shifting behind her eyes. The fear was still there, but beneath it, something else was starting to form. Something sharper. "You think I'm just going to let you do this?" she asked. Ethan's expression hardened again. "I think you don't have a choice." Silence filled the room, heavy, final. Naomi nodded slowly, as if she understood. But inside, something had just broken free. Because for the first time, she wasn't thinking about fixing anything. She was thinking about surviving. Ethan turned toward the door, already done with the conversation. "We have a meeting with my attorney next week. Be ready." He left without another word. The door clicked shut behind him. Naomi stood there in the silence, her entire body trembling, not with weakness, but with the weight of what she had just realized. They had already written her story. They had already decided how this would end. But as she slowly walked back toward the window, staring out at the dark street below, one thought began to take shape in her mind. What if she didn't follow their script? What if she disappeared before they could finish it? And for the first time, Naomi considered doing something that terrified her more than anything else. Walking away before they erased her completely. Naomi didn't sleep that night. She lay on her side, facing the wall, eyes open in the darkness while the faint glow from the hallway slipped under the door. Every sound felt louder, the ticking clock, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of floorboards whenever her mother-in-law moved. They were still awake. Of course they were. They had too much control to ever truly rest. Naomi kept one hand on her stomach, feeling the slow, steady movements of her baby. It grounded her, anchored her in a moment that was rapidly slipping out of her control. "They're not taking you," she whispered silently, her lips barely moving. "Not like this." But the words felt fragile, like promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Sometime after midnight, she sat up. The decision came quietly, without drama. It didn't feel brave. It felt necessary. If she stayed, they would erase her. If she left, she might still have a chance. Naomi moved slowly, carefully, listening for any sign of movement outside her door. When the hallway finally fell silent, she stood and began to gather what little she still had. There wasn't much. Her wallet, nearly empty. A few pieces of clothing. Her prenatal records, hidden at the bottom of a drawer where her mother-in-law hadn't thought to look. Everything else had already been taken from her. Even her phone had been replaced weeks ago, a gift from Ethan after he claimed her old one was malfunctioning. Naomi had noticed the difference immediately. Battery that drained too fast, apps that opened on their own. He had been watching her, tracking her. The realization made her chest tighten, but it also made her more careful. She didn't take the phone. Instead, she slipped it back onto the nightstand exactly where it had been, untouched. Let him think she was still here. Let him believe she was still following their plan. Naomi changed into the quietest clothes she owned, her hands trembling as she tied her shoes. Every small sound felt like a risk. When she opened the bedroom door, she paused. The hallway stretched ahead, dim and empty. Her mother-in-law's door was slightly ajar. Naomi's breath caught. From inside, she could hear voices. Low, urgent. She froze, instinctively stepping closer without thinking. "The hearing needs to happen before the third trimester," her mother-in-law was saying. "The judge will be more sympathetic if we show urgency." "And the evaluation?" Ethan's voice replied. "It's already arranged. Dr. Keller will confirm everything we need. All Naomi has to do is show up and behave exactly like she has been." A small, bitter laugh. "She won't even realize she's helping us." Naomi's stomach dropped. Keller, evaluation. It was already set. A doctor who would sign off on whatever they needed. Her nails dug into her palm as she pressed herself against the wall, forcing herself to stay silent. "There's one more thing," Ethan added. "Once we have custody, I want to relocate." A pause. "Out of state?" "Further, I've been talking to someone. There's an opportunity overseas. Better position, better environment for the baby." The baby. Naomi felt like she couldn't breathe. "You're moving fast," his mother said, but there was approval in her tone. "I have to," Ethan replied. "The sooner she's out of the picture, the better." Out of the picture. Naomi stepped back slowly, her entire body shaking now, not from fear alone, but from something deeper. Finality. They weren't just taking her child. They were planning to disappear with it, forever. She turned and walked silently down the hallway, each step heavier than the last. When she reached the front door, her hand hovered over the lock. This was it. There would be no coming back from this, no second chances. Naomi glanced back one last time at the dark hallway, at the life she had tried so desperately to hold together. Then she opened the door and stepped out into the night. But as the door closed quietly behind her, one terrifying thought followed her into the darkness. If they realized she was gone too soon, they wouldn't just take her child. They would make sure no one ever believed her again. The night air hit Naomi like a shock. It was colder than she expected, sharp against her skin, but she welcomed it. It felt real. It felt like something she could still control. She didn't look back, not at the apartment, not at the life she had just walked away from. Because she knew if she did, even for a second, she might hesitate, and hesitation was something she could no longer afford. Her steps were slow at first, careful, almost uncertain, then faster. By the time she reached the corner, her breathing had turned uneven, her heart racing not just from fear, but from the weight of what she had done. She had left. No plan, no money, no phone, just instinct. Naomi wrapped her arms around herself as she moved down the quiet street, her mind racing through possibilities. She couldn't go to the police, not yet. Without proof, Ethan would twist everything. He would say she ran away, that she was unstable, that she was proving his case. And people would believe him. He had already started planting that narrative. A car passed by, headlights sweeping over her for a brief second, making her flinch. Every sound felt like danger now. Every shadow felt like it was watching her. Because somewhere deep down, she knew. The moment they realized she was gone, they would come looking. And not to bring her back safely. To control the story, Naomi stopped under a flickering streetlight, her breath visible in the air. Her hand moved to her stomach again, pressing gently as if grounding herself. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." But the truth was she had nowhere to go. Her mind scrambled for options. Friends? She hadn't spoken to most of them in months. Slowly cut off. Quietly isolated. Every connection she once had been weakened, redirected, or erased. Her mother lived 3 states away, and even if Naomi could get there, Ethan would be waiting. He knew her patterns. He knew where she would run. He had built her world small on purpose. A wave of panic rose in her chest. For a moment, she considered turning back. Just for a second. Going home, pretending she hadn't seen anything, pretending she hadn't heard that conversation. Maybe if she stayed quiet, played along, she could delay it. Buy time. But then she remembered the file, the words. Supervised visits, out of the picture, her stomach twisted. No, there was no delaying this. She's walking again, faster now, her steps more urgent. The city stretched out around her, strangers, lights, noise in the distance, but none of it felt safe. Then something caught her attention. A building on the next block, dim but still open. A small sign in the window read, Legal Aid Clinic. Naomi slowed. Her eyes lingered on the door. Legal, her pulse quickened. She had no money, no connections, no proof that would hold up in court. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely powerless. Naomi pushed the door open. A bell chimed softly overhead. Inside, the space was small, worn, almost forgotten. A single desk lamp illuminated stacks of paperwork. Behind the counter, a tired-looking woman glanced up, surprised. "We're closing," she said automatically. Naomi stepped forward, her voice barely steady. "I don't need long," she said. I need to know something." The woman studied her for a moment, her gaze drifting briefly to Naomi's stomach, then back to her face. "What kind of help are you looking for?" Naomi hesitated. "Because how did you explain something like this? How did you prove a life that was being erased before it even ended?" Her fingers tightened at her sides. "My husband," she said slowly, "is trying to prove I'm mentally unfit so he can take my baby." The words hung in the air, heavy, dangerous. The woman's expression changed instantly. "Sit down," she said quietly. Naomi sat. For the first time that night, she wasn't running. But as she looked around the small clinic, something unsettled her again. Because on the wall behind the desk was a framed certificate, signed by a name she recognized instantly. Dr. Keller. Naomi's blood ran cold. The same doctor. The same man Ethan had just said would confirm everything. And suddenly, the place she'd walked into for help felt like another part of the trap. Naomi's body went completely still. Her eyes stayed locked on the name at the bottom of the certificate, her pulse suddenly loud in her ears. Dr. Keller. The same man. The same name Ethan had spoken so casually, like everything was already arranged. Her fingers curled slightly against her lap. This wasn't coincidence. Place, this clinic, it was connected. Are you okay? The woman behind the desk asked, her voice softer now. Naomi forced herself to blink, dragging her gaze away from the wall. That doctor, she said carefully, nodding toward the certificate. Is he part of this clinic? The woman glanced back briefly. Doc, he consults sometimes, mostly evaluations. Why? Naomi's stomach dropped. Evaluations, of course. She swallowed hard, forcing her voice to stay level. My husband mentioned that name. Said I have an appointment. The woman's expression shifted, something unreadable flickering across her face. What's your husband's name? Naomi hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to lie, but she needed to know how deep this went. Ethan Cole. The reaction was immediate. It was small, barely there. A tightening of the woman's lips, a slight pause before she spoke again. But Naomi saw it. She saw recognition, and that was enough. The room suddenly felt smaller, more dangerous. The woman straightened slightly. You should sit back. You look overwhelmed. Naomi didn't move. Her mind was racing now, faster than it had all night. Ethan had connections here. Dr. Keller was already involved. And this woman, how much did she know? Is he expecting me? Naomi asked quietly. Another pause. The woman said, but if there's an evaluation scheduled, it's best you attend. It'll help your case. Help your case. The words landed wrong. Naomi's chest tightened. No, she said slowly, I don't think it will. The woman's eyes sharpened slightly. If you don't comply, the court may interpret that negatively. There it was, pressure, subtle, controlled, familiar. Naomi pushed back from the chair, standing up. I should go. The woman said just a fraction too quickly. Wait. If you're dealing with a custody situation, walking out right now isn't the best decision. Naomi's heart pounded harder. She was being guided, redirected, contained, just like at home. I said I should go, Naomi repeated, firmer now. For a brief moment, something cold flashed in the woman's eyes, gone. Of course, she said, her tone smoothing out again. But I'd advise you not to delay. These things tend to escalate. Naomi nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She turned and walked toward the door, her steps steady even as her insides twisted. The bell chimed again as she pushed it open. The night air hit her face, and only then did she let out the breath she'd been holding. That place wasn't safe, not even close, and now she knew something worse. This wasn't just Ethan and his mother. They had people, professionals, a system. Naomi stepped back onto the sidewalk, her mind racing faster than ever. If the doctor was already compromised, if the clinic was part of it, then where could she go? Who could she trust? Her hands trembled as she wrapped her arms around herself again. Think. She needed to think. There had to be someone outside their reach. Someone who didn't know Ethan. Someone who didn't owe his mother anything. Someone who wouldn't see her as a case, but as a person. And then suddenly, a memory surfaced. A name. A place. 3 towns over. A man who specialized in cases no one else wanted to touch. Naomi's breath caught. It was a risk. A long one. But it was the first thing that didn't feel like part of their plan. She turned toward the street, already moving, already deciding, because now she understood something she hadn't fully grasped before. This wasn't just about escaping. This was about finding someone who could fight back. And if she chose wrong again, she wouldn't get a second chance. The bus ride felt endless. Naomi sat near the back, her body angled toward the window, watching the city blur into unfamiliar streets. Every stop made her tense. Every new passenger made her heart jump. She kept expecting Ethan's face in the reflection. Or worse, his mother's calm, knowing stare. But no one came. Not yet. 3 towns over sounded when she thought about it. But in reality, it meant hours of moving, waiting, hiding in plain sight with nothing but the clothes she wore and a secret that could destroy everything. Her hand stayed on her stomach the entire time. The baby shifted again, a slow, steady movement that reminded her she wasn't alone in this. She had someone to protect. Someone who couldn't afford for her to panic. Just a little longer, she whispered under her breath. By the time she stepped off the final bus, the sky had started to lighten. The town was smaller, quieter, the kind of place where people notice strangers. Naomi pulled her jacket tighter around her and walked quickly, her eyes scanning every storefront until she found it. A narrow building tucked between a pawn shop and a laundromat. No bright sign, no welcoming display, just a faded name etched into the glass door. Elias Carter, Private Investigations and Legal Consulting. Naomi hesitated. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, pale, tired, eyes wide with exhaustion and fear. She barely recognized herself anymore. Good. Maybe no one else would either. She pushed the door open. A small bell rang overhead, softer than the one at the clinic, almost hesitant. Inside, the space was dim, cluttered with old files, metal cabinets, and the faint smell of coffee that had been sitting too long. A man sat behind a desk at the back, reading something under a yellowed lamp. He didn't look up immediately. Naomi stepped forward, her voice catching slightly. "Are you Elias?" The man turned the page first. Then slowly he lifted his gaze. He was older than she expected. Late 50s maybe. Gray at the temples. Sharp eyes that didn't miss anything. "Who's asking?" Naomi swallowed. "I need help." He studied her for a long moment, his gaze drifting briefly to her stomach, then back to her face. "What kind of help?" he asked. Naomi took a breath, steadying herself. "My husband is trying to prove I'm mentally unfit so he can take my baby," she said. "He has a lawyer, a doctor, connections. I don't have anything." Silence filled the room. Elias leaned back slightly in his chair, watching her in a way that felt different from everyone else. Not dismissive, not controlling. Evaluating. "Why come to me?" he asked. Naomi hesitated because she didn't fully know, because this was a gamble, because everything depended on whether he believed her. "I was told you take cases no one else wants," she said quietly, "and I don't think anyone else is going to believe me." Another pause. Longer this time. Elias exhaled slowly, then stood, walking around the desk. He stopped a few feet in front of her, close enough that she could see the lines in his face, the weight of years behind his eyes. "You're right about one thing," he said. "Most people won't believe you." Naomi's chest tightened. "But I don't work on belief," he continued. "I work on proof." Hope flickered, fragile but real. "I can get proof," she said quickly. "I saw documents. I heard them talking. They're hiding money. They're planning to take the baby out of the country." Elias raised a hand, stopping her. "Slow down," he said. "If what you're saying is true, you're not just dealing with a custody fight, you're dealing with a setup." Naomi nodded, her eyes burning. "I know." He watched her for another long second. Then he said something that made her stomach drop. "Then you need to understand this," Elias said quietly. "If they're as prepared as you think they are, they're already looking for you." Naomi's breath caught, because in that exact moment, a phone on his desk lit up. Unknown number. It rang once, twice, didn't move to answer it. But Naomi couldn't look away, because deep down she already knew. That call wasn't random, and somehow they had found her. The courtroom was quieter this time. No laughter, no smug whispers, no confident glances exchanged between Ethan and his mother. The air felt heavier, thicker, like something had already shifted long before the judge even entered. Naomi stood at her table, one hand resting lightly on her stomach, the other holding a thin folder that had taken her 3 months to build. Across the room, Ethan avoided her eyes. His posture was different now, tense, rigid, like a man bracing for impact. His mother sat behind him, her face still composed, but her fingers tapped against her purse in small, restless movements. They knew. The judge took her seat, her expression unreadable as she scanned the documents in front of her. The room settled into silence. "Mr. Cole," she began, her voice calm but sharp. "Before we proceed with your petition regarding custody, I have several concerns about the financial disclosures submitted to this court." Ethan's lawyer stood quickly, attempting to respond, but the judge raised a hand. "I'm not finished." Naomi didn't move. She didn't need to. Every piece was already in place. Elias had worked quietly, methodically, pulling threads Naomi didn't even know existed. Offshore accounts, transfers routed through companies tied to Ethan's mother, payments to Dr. Keller for consulting services that went far beyond standard evaluations. It wasn't just manipulation, it was a system. And more importantly, the judge continued, her gaze lifting toward Ethan, there is evidence suggesting deliberate attempts to misrepresent Mrs. Cole's mental state to gain legal advantage. A murmur rippled through the courtroom, Ethan's face drained of color. "That is not," his lawyer started, but again, the judge cut him off. "I have reviewed the recordings," she said. Naomi's heart beat once, hard. The recordings. The night she left, the voices in the hallway captured through a device. Elias had helped her place weeks earlier when she briefly returned under the guise of reconciliation. Every word, plan out of the picture. Relocation overseas, evaluation arranged. The truth, spoken freely when they thought she was already defeated. Ethan sat down slowly, his hands shaking now. For the first time since this began, he looked afraid. "Mrs. Cole," the judge said, turning to Naomi. "Do you have anything to add?" Naomi stood. Her voice was steady but not cold. "I trusted my husband," she said. "I trust his family. And they used that trust to try to erase me from my own child's life." She paused, her fingers tightening slightly over her stomach. I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for the chance to be a mother without being controlled, monitored, or replaced. Silence followed. Deep, final. The judge nodded once, then looked back at Ethan. Mr. Cole, your conduct raises serious legal and ethical concerns. This court will not reward deception. Ethan closed his eyes. It was over. Primary custody is awarded to Mrs. Cole, the judge said. All pending evaluations arranged by the respondent are dismissed. A full investigation into financial misconduct and potential fraud will be referred to the appropriate authorities. A sharp sound came from the gallery, his mother's breath-catching, breaking for the first time. Naomi didn't look at them. She didn't need to, because the power they had built so carefully had just collapsed in a single moment. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different, lighter. Naomi stepped into the sunlight, her shoulders finally lowering as the tension she had carried for months began to slip away. Her phone buzzed in her hand, messages, calls, noise from a world that suddenly felt open again. But she ignored all of it. Instead, she placed her hand over her stomach, closing her eyes for a brief second. "We're okay," she whispered. For the first time, she believed it. Behind her, somewhere inside that building, Ethan Cole was facing the consequences of every choice he had made. His career, his reputation, his control, all of it slipping through his fingers. And Naomi walked forward, not as the woman they tried to erase, but as the one who refused to disappear. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever been underestimated or made to feel small, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. And maybe, just maybe, your story matters more than you think.